Hello, this is Storyteller Bob with this week's installment of True Ghost Stories. The first one is entitled The Old Doctor. The sports car skidded around the curve, tires squealing, and roared down the straightaway. It had stopped raining less than an hour ago, and the deserted coastal highway was still wet. Scudding clouds obscured the waxing crescent moon. Beyond the glare of the car's headlights, it was dark as pitch. Three friends laughed and joked in the speeding car as it swept towards another curve. "Hey, this thing can really move!" From the back seat, Martin had to shout to be heard over the roar of the engine. "Yeah, I've gotten close to 90 between here and Shoals End," laughed Sam. "I bet I can beat that." "Just don't try it tonight," chuckled Abby nervously. "The road is still pretty wet from the storms." "Well, don't you want to get to the party?" "Sure, but there's no hurry. The band won't go away." "Well, I want to get good seats." The speeding car barely slowed as it roared into a downhill curve. Suddenly, the headlights showed water sheeting across the road. A white torrent of water cascaded over the rocks beside the road, flooding across to either side of the culvert. "Look out!" screamed Abby. Sam tried to steer closer to the shoulder, but the car began to hydroplane. It crashed into the culvert, spun around 180 degrees, then skidded backwards off the opposite side of the road. The passengers screamed as the car rolled once and slid over the edge of the embankment, crashing onto the sloping ledge about 8 feet below the berm. It glided forward into a boulder and stopped. Abby was momentarily stunned. The sharp pain that lanced through her right shoulder and upper arm snapped her back to the present. She felt disoriented. Martin sprawled across the back seat, and Sam slumped forward over the broken steering wheel. "Sam? Sam, are you hurt?" she asked. No response. "Sam? Martin?" She was close to panic now. Neither one was moving. She had no idea how badly they were hurt, but she knew they had to get help. What if the wrecked car caught fire? She had to get out and get them out. Painfully, she unbuckled her harness and tried to open the door. It was jammed closed. She tried to roll down the window. Her shoulder screamed in protest, so she tried to lower the window left-handed. That worked, so she hastily crawled out of the window, favoring her injured shoulder. She flopped awkwardly onto the uneven, rocky ledge, gasping in the pain of her shoulder. Something must be broken, she thought. She caught a whiff of gasoline. She couldn't see the side of the battered car in the shadow of the ledge, but the crumpled metal she felt around the door handle convinced her that the door would not open. She edged around the back of the car and tried the driver's side door. To her great relief, it opened, and Sam fell forward towards her. Ignoring the pain in her shoulder, she tried to ease him out of the car. His head lolled onto her shoulder as she turned him sideways, but his right foot was caught under the dashboard. She eased him back onto the seat and knelt beside the car, groping in the dark around his ankle. She felt some cables entangling his ankle, and a piece of metal pinned his foot to the floor beside the brake pedal. Feeling carefully in the dark, she moved around the twisted cables and pulled them away from his ankle. Next, she tried to release his foot, but the shoe was still caught on something. Perhaps the laces were hooked. She untied his shoelaces and tried again. This time, his foot moved. She grabbed Sam under his arms and eased him out of the car. He slumped against her. In the dim moonlight, she saw his face was covered with blood. Horrified, she almost dropped him, but she felt a faint breath on her cheek. He was still alive. She half crawled, half carried him to the rock face, careful to keep his neck from twisting. He was out cold. She leaned him back against a boulder with his head resting in a hollow, then returned for Martin. She heard him groan inside the car. Whoa, what happened? Where are we, Sam? Sam? Abby? He mumbled. I'm right here, Martin. We wrecked. I need to get you out of the car. Why? My leg hurts. I don't think I can move. Martin, you have to get out. The car could explode any minute, and Sam's unconscious. I need your help to move him. Where's Sam? Martin asked, his voice barely audible. He's out here. Come on, we have to hurry. Give me your hand and I'll help you out. Abby unlocked the seat and pushed it onto the broken steering wheel to make room for Martin. Martin was staring dumbly at the floor of the car. One leg was twisted at an odd angle. Martin, come on! Martin was groping around the back floor in the dark. I think I lost. My watch must be back here somewhere, he muttered. Martin, come on. The car could catch fire any second. We'll come back for your watch. Move it. Okay. Don't get mad. Martin seemed to be in another world. How badly did he hit his head when they rolled? I'll pull your legs out together. Keep your weight on your good leg as you get out. I'll help you. Got it? Yeah, okay. Somehow she got his legs past the seat and onto the ground together, then took his arm around her shoulder and pulled him out of the car. He gasped and hesitated when he put weight on his injured leg, but Abby noticed the wall wasn't as tall further down the hill, so she kept him limping along the rock wall until the ledge ended. Okay, now put your foot on that rock and step up. I'll boost you and then just turn around and sit down on the berm. Then I'll climb up and help you stand. Ready? Yeah, I think so. She managed to get him seated on the edge of the berm, then struggled up the rain-slicked rocks herself. Now, put your foot on the ground, there, and I'll pull you up from behind. Brace on your good leg. Ready? Go. She struggled to lift him to his feet. She slowly led him to a boulder beside the berm, near where the car had rolled, and they both sat down heavily. She was exhausted. Her head was throbbing, and her shoulder was screaming when she moved it. She looked down the road in both directions, but saw no lights. Now you stay here and flag down any cars that come along, she panted. We've got to get you to a doctor. Then I've got to go back for Sam. He's still down there. Okay. As she rose, he added, Don't forget my watch. It's not like him to obsess over a watch when his friends are hurt. He must have had a concussion. Was it safe to leave him there by the road? But what else could she do? Sam was just where she'd left him. He hadn't moved. He was taller and heavier than Martin. She tried to remember the fireman's assist from her first aid class. Careful to keep his neck straight, she raised him up. He was so heavy that she almost fell. Inch by inch, she dragged him along the rock face, her every muscle howling with the strain. When the ledge ended, she had to stop. She leaned him over the edge of the berm, holding him in place as she gasped for breath. She'd never be able to lift him bodily over the edge. Somehow she had to get help. In despair, she screamed, Help! Help! Someone help us! We need a doctor! As her head fell forward onto her arm, she heard the soft crunch of footsteps on the gravel berm above her. Startled, she raised her head. A dark shadow loomed over them as the crescent moon slipped behind a cloud. Was it Martin? Hang on there, Missy. I'm coming. The deep voice was matter-of-fact and scarcely louder than a whisper. But she had no trouble understanding it. Who are you? She couldn't see his face. He seemed to be dressed in black, with a hat pulled low over his forehead. Suddenly she was a little frightened. I'm Doc Osborne. I'm from up the hill there. I heard you call. He nodded across the road, and near the crest of the hill she saw what looked like a lighted window in a dark silhouette of a house. He knelt at the edge of the berm and gently took hold of Sam's shoulders. With one hand he seemed to check Sam's neck, first one side and then the other. "His neck seems okay, but we won't take a chance. I'll steady his head and slide him towards me. You lift his legs at the knees. Can you do that?" "I'll try." "Okay, ready? Lift." Sam slid easily onto the berm. As the doctor knelt over Sam, Abby clambered up beside him and knelt next to Sam. An old-fashioned doctor's bag lay open beside them. "That curve is a bad one for speed. Always has been. After a storm, the water just pours off the hillside, and that culvert has always been too small. You can't see the water on the road until you're in it." "Is he hurt badly?" "Well, he has a concussion and probably a few cracked ribs. He has some cuts on his scalp, you can see that. Nothing deep, but the scalp always bleeds a lot. We'll have to get that to stop. Now, here's what I want you to do." "Wait, what about my other friend? I think he has a concussion too, and a broken leg." The doctor hesitated, as if listening for something, then turned back to Sam. "He's not going anywhere. We need to patch up this one first. Go back to the culvert and reach into the outflow pipe. You'll feel something fuzzy. It's just moss. The flowing water will have washed it nice and clean. Pull off 2 big handfuls and bring it back." She looked at him uncertainly, supporting her injured arm at the elbow. The pain eased. "Moss, you said?" "Yep, better than cotton for cleaning wounds, and that particular kind fights infection besides. The Indians used it. It's hard to find around here anymore." "Well, if you say so." She trotted back to the culvert and gingerly felt around the edge of the pipe. The road had stopped flooding, and the cold water no longer filled the pipe. She felt something almost immediately. She pulled out a spongy wad of whatever it was. It was moss, just like he'd said. She quickly plucked out several more clumps and hurried back. "Good." He didn't look up as he handed her a handkerchief. "Wring it out as best you can, and hand me some walnut-sized clumps." She did so, and watched him deftly wrap the damp moss, fuzzy side out, around 2 fingers. He expertly cleaned the lacerations in Sam's scalp with his left hand, while suturing with his right. He frequently held out his hand for clean moss swabs, so Abby had to keep a steady supply ready. She watched him work with new respect. "Wow, this guy's good." The sickle moon popped out of the clouds briefly. With his head down, intent on Sam, the man's hat brim still hid most of his face, but she caught a glimpse of a bushy walrus mustache. "Another eccentric," she guessed. "It seems like everyone here in California is. But he seems to know what he's doing." When she eventually looked back at Sam, she saw to her amazement that the doctor was all but done. Sam's head was no longer streaked with blood, and the lacerations she had seen earlier were closed. "Only one of those was deep, and it'll stay closed now. He'll look scary in the light until the stitches come out, but in 6 months you won't even see where they were. Wake up there, son. You're going to be just fine." As if on cue, Sam's eyelids fluttered open. He tried to sit up, but winced and clutched at his chest. He lay back down immediately. What happened?" "You need to lie still until the ambulance comes. You have a bad bump on the head and some cracked ribs. Lie still and it won't hurt so bad to breathe. Your lady friend is here, but she needs to help me fix up your other friend." He nodded to Abby. "Let's go." "Lay still, Sam. I'll be back." As they rose, he directed her again back to the culvert. "You'll find some brushwood there, on the uphill side that wouldn't go through the pipe. Bring me 3 broom-handle-sized sticks, as straight as you can find. I'll trim them." "What for? Splints?" she guessed. "Bullseye, missy." She quickly picked up 3 fairly straight sticks and returned to where Martin was sitting. The doctor was checking Martin's head, and Martin was still asking about his watch. "Is he okay? He keeps asking about his watch every few minutes." He has a knot on the head too, but no skull fractures. He'll snap out of it soon. His leg needs to be set before it stiffens. Those sticks will do just fine. He pulled out a heavy sheath knife and began shaving the sticks clean. The knife glinted in the faint moonlight, and Abby felt a sudden stab of fear. "I've never seen anyone carry a knife that big," she thought. It certainly made short work of the sticks. He laid the smoothed sticks on the ground, put away his knife, and dug out a bandage roll from his pocket. "Okay, stretch him out flat on the ground. You'll have to hold him down while I pull on his leg. Once it's set, we can splint it. Here's a stick for him to bite on when I pull." "Whoa, what?" Still dazed, Martin didn't seem too sure about this plan. They both helped settle Martin flat on the ground. Abby stretched across Martin's chest, and the doctor deftly placed the stick between Martin's back teeth. "Ready? Hold him!" She felt Martin jerk once and shout, and heard a popping sound. "All done. Hold these two splints, right here, just like this. Don't let them move till I'm done." Martin groaned and spit out the stick. The doctor held the third splint in place, and quickly wrapped the splints to Martin's leg with a bandage roll. Martin's leg was soon held rigid between the splints. "Now, just keep them quiet. And here, let me rig a sling for you. Your collarbone's broken." "What? How did you know?" He didn't answer her, but he looped the remainder of the bandage roll around her wrist and over her left shoulder several times. He tied it across her chest, holding her arm snugly against her. His fingers were gentle, but they felt strangely cold on her skin. "That should feel better. Now, the ambulance will be here very soon." "It does. Thanks. Thanks so much for helping us. I don't think I could have—" She heard a distant siren and turned to look. Red lights were flashing in the distance, threading their way closer along the coastal road. "Who called the ambulance? Hey, where did he go?" Martin was up on one elbow, looking all around as he spoke. Abby looked back to where the doctor had been standing, then quickly up and down the road. He was gone. "I don't know. How could he have vanished so quickly?" she thought. "Why didn't he wait until the ambulance arrived?" She looked up the hill, but the lighted window she had seen earlier was dark. In fact, she couldn't even see the silhouette of the house anymore. "That's odd. Martin, did anything seem strange about him? The doctor, I mean?" "Well, yes. He was right beside me, but I could never see his eyes. It was like they were black pits. All I could see was that humongous mustache. And his hands were so cold." The rescue squad pulled up and stopped, its lights turning the dark night into day. 2 EMTs jumped out and approached Martin and Abby, and the third trotted back towards Sam. "What happened to you people?" "Our car slid off the road near that flooded culvert. It's down there, on the level below. We were all hurt. But how did you hear about it? Did the doctor call you?" "We're not sure who called. We got a landline 911 about 20 minutes ago. No voice, all we got was static, but they located it as coming from here. The dispatcher didn't have any landlines going into this area and thought we should probably check it out. Hey, it looks like someone already did our work for us." "A doctor gave us all first aid. A Doc Osborne," began Abby. The 2 EMTs froze in their tracks, suddenly staring at her. "Who?" they both said together. "He said his name was Doc Osborne, said he lived up on that hill. I saw a house up there earlier with a light on, but I can't see it now. I never got a good look at him, but he had a big bushy walrus mustache. Why are you looking at me like that?" "Doc Osborne did all this? Your sling and his splints?" The EMTs were incredulous. "Well, yes, and he— Hey guys, come check this out!" The third EMT waved them over. Abby walked with them to Sam. In the bright glare of the EMT's mag light, she could hardly see the multiple suture lines that crossed Sam's scalp. The stitches were tiny, evenly spaced, and uncannily equal in length. "Look at that awesome sewing job! I couldn't match that if my life depended on it." "He did it in the dark while he swabbed the edges with moss," said Abby. "How could he get it so perfect?" "Moss? Oh no! Guys, is it him again?" The third EMT looked alarmed. The other two nodded. "What are we talking about? Doc Osborne?" said Abby. The EMT's behavior puzzled her. Why were they so leery of Doc Osborne? "Guys, this is creeping me out. Let's load up and get out of here." The third EMT was looking fearfully up and down the road. They quickly cinched Sam onto a stretcher and loaded him into their vehicle without another word. Martin and Abby took even less time to secure. The rescue squad made a quick U-turn and headed for the trauma center further down the coast. "So what is it about Doc Osborne that bothers you guys? Is he not a real doctor?" All three of them started to talk at once, then sheepishly stopped. One began again. "Doc Osborne used to practice around here. Old-timers say he came here from Oregon, but no one knew for sure. Wherever he came from, he knew a lot of Indian herbal medicine. He used plants and whatever he had handy to fix up his patients. He had quite a knack for healing people, and always seemed to show up whenever he was needed. He used to live in a small house up on the crest of that hill back there. For years he was the only doctor around here. Apparently he had quite a loyal following. I can see why. He certainly was a godsend for us. And he just vanished right before you arrived. We didn't see where he went. Does he still live on the hill back there? I'd like to come back here sometime and thank him personally for all he did." The EMTs chuckled. "Well, you might have a hard time doing that. Doc Osborne's house burned down many years ago. Only the stone foundations are left. I went up there once in daylight. You see, Doc Osborne and his horse were washed off the road, close to that culvert where you wrecked, and fell to their deaths during a storm in 1887. Some say it was on the way to his last call. You're one of about 24 people who have been treated by his ghost." True story. Abby was a good friend of mine in high school. This next one is called The Spirit of Kokopelli. "Manuel, see me in my office on the way out." "Okay, boss." As the boss retreated to his office, Manuel quickly cleaned up his workplace. He carefully put away his unfinished flute. It was well after 5 o'clock, and he didn't want to be too late getting home. His wife was ill, and he knew she'd want some relief from caring for their 2 children all day. He grinned at the other employees as they walked out the door, teasing him. "Uh-oh. What did you do now, Manuel?" "Oh, he probably just wants to give you a raise." That brought a burst of laughter. The boss was a notorious skinflint, paying wages that were well below minimum. But the reservation offered no other employers and very few jobs. For all of them, living on the reservation as they did, something was better than nothing. Manuel was grateful for the job, as well as for the extra 40 cents an hour he earned as foreman. He had been making the wooden flutes for 6 years, longer than any of the others, and he did his job very well. He was the one who trained the new people, and turnover was high. Manuel and his wife and sons could just barely scrape by on what he earned. "You wanted to see me, boss?" "Yes, our flutes haven't been selling very well this year. I'm going to let Luis go, and I'm cutting everyone's pay by 30 cents an hour, including yours. Otherwise, we shut down." Manuel felt like he'd been slugged in the stomach. How would he and his family survive? How would any of the others survive? And what about Luis? Although he was the last hired, he was showing real talent as a traditional flute maker. Luis was saving to get married. "With fewer people, we will make fewer flutes?" "No, we'll have to make more so I can sell them cheaper." "How can we do that? And how can we live on what you'll be paying us?" "Work harder. Take it or leave it, Manuel. It's that or shut down." Manuel turned and left without saying anything more. As he got into his battered old pickup, he looked at the weathered sign on the shabby building he had just left. Kokopelli's Flutes. It seemed to him to be a travesty, a twisting of the native beliefs about Kokopelli. The flute player was a trickster, but historically he represented the hope of spring, the bounty of the earth, and the coming of the traders. Here the sign advertised a trade all right, the boss taking their time and skill and giving very little money in return. It was a dirty trick. But what could they do? The boss watched Manuel go and chuckled to himself. He knew they'd all stay. They had nowhere else to go. All employers on the reservation had to be at least half Native American. The boss was only 1/8 Native American, but the tribe looked the other way to keep jobs he provided on the reservation. And selling the flutes his employees made was profitable for him. Oh yes, very profitable. He had recently raised his selling prices for the flutes. He had many orders and his company was doing very well. He had been reading about Kokopelli and knew that traditionally, among other roles, Kokopelli was a trickster. "Well, I'm just tricking my employees. I'll make a lot more money this way. Too bad for them. I'd make a good Kokopelli." He had a book in his desk that told about Kokopelli, and he took it out. It was a book from the tiny reservation library, long overdue, but it was checked out on someone else's card, so he didn't care. Turning to the correct chapter, he reread the part he had highlighted. It told how Kokopelli was supposed to bring with him the end of winter and the spring rains to nourish the new crops. It's also described how Kokopelli was reputed to play his flute as he approached each village with his burden of trade goods and seeds. It explained how the flute music ensured his welcome to each village, and how he played and danced most of the night. And it told how Kokopelli charmed with his music all the maidens in each village, and he often left them pregnant when he departed the next day. The boss imagined himself as Kokopelli and smiled. "That would be great. I could do whatever I wanted to. Of course, except for the maidens, I do that already." He scowled. That was a sore point. Of course, his reputation was well established on the reservation. He was raised off the reservation, but he had been given the name Dry Creek for his selfishness. When he returned, a dry creek is a creek that brings water for all, but if it's dry, it's no good to anyone. The name stuck. None of the women would have anything to do with him, and that rankled. "I'm one of the richest men on the reservation. If I had Kokopelli's flute, I could have them all." The thought stayed with him as he put the book back in his desk drawer. "I wonder how I could get that flute, or maybe just become Kokopelli for the spring dance." "Okay, you guys, listen up. The flutes haven't been selling, so we're going to have to make some changes. Luis, I'm going to have to let you go. The rest of you, I'm cutting your pay by 30 cents an hour. And add one more flute to your quota each week," he raised his hand to cut off the startled responses, "or else we'll have to shut down. Any questions?" Shocked and angry, they just glared at him. None of them said anything more. Luis quietly rose and walked out. "All right then, get busy." Dry Creek walked into his office and closed the door. He had them over a barrel and they knew it. He wasn't worried. If they didn't produce, he'd replace them. He could easily do that. Right now, he had other things on his mind. He wanted to talk to the tribal shaman on his way home from work today. He had read a story describing an amulet which could not just make him look like Kokopelli, but actually change him into Kokopelli. The ancient story sounded like it had actually happened, but he didn't really believe it. Supposedly, an old shaman in the Four Corners area had made the amulet and then created the ceremony to activate it. He didn't think much of his own tribe's shaman, or any shaman for that matter, but maybe the man knew someone who could make the amulet. And the spring dance was coming up next month. He smiled as he thought of himself as Kokopelli at the dance, like a hawk among chickens. The feathers will fly that night for sure. The entire day really dragged for Dry Creek, despite his fantasies about being Kokopelli. None of his employees spoke to him all day. Not that they ever said much to him anyway, but today it seemed like they were pointedly ignoring him. That annoyed him, but he couldn't think of any way to punish them. He was glad when they left, promptly at 5, which was unusual, because it meant that now he could go see the shaman. He locked the door and climbed into his brand new Jeep. Gunning the engine, he fishtailed out of the dusty parking lot. The shaman lived with his wife in a small hut on the mesa. It was isolated, with several miles of poor roads separating it from the nearest settlement. The weather had been dry that winter, so the way was dusty and not washed out. He ground the gears of his Jeep as he climbed the sloping track to the top of the mesa. Finally, he made it to level ground and skidded to a stop in front of the shaman's hut. The man was already outside, almost as if he was waiting for him. The man's wife was carefully preparing the ground in their small vegetable plot. Dry Creek climbed out of the Jeep. "Evening, old man." "Evening." "What can you tell me about Kokopelli?" "What do you want to know?" "I've read that one can be made to look like Kokopelli, to represent him at the spring dance. The tribe keeps his costume and chooses a dancer to act the part, right?" "It is not so simple as that, but one can be made to look like Kokopelli, yes." "What if someone actually wanted to become Kokopelli?" "That is dangerous magic." The man made a strange motion with his hand. "I've heard that an amulet can be made that can cause someone to really become Kokopelli. Is that true?" "Perhaps, but such magic is not to be trifled with." "Do you know someone who could make such an amulet?" "Perhaps. Who desires it?" "I do." "That is a foolish desire." The shaman turned away. "Look, I'd make it worth your time. How much do you want for it? For the amulet and the ceremony that makes it happen?" "Why do you want this?" "I want to do what Kokopelli is known for. Why is my business." "So it is for yourself and not for the tribe?" "Yeah. Look, old man, I told you I'd pay for it." "It may cost you more than you're willing to pay." "What do you mean by that, old man? I think I'd make a good Kokopelli. I'm going to play a trick on the haughty maidens of the village. Serve 'em right." "That is why you plan to do this?" "That's right. Now, can you make me the amulet?" The shaman scowled and hesitated, but then said yes. It seemed that the word was torn out of him against his will. "And the ceremony to make sure it happens? Can you do that too?" "Yes." "Good. Then how much will I owe you for the amulet and the ceremony?" "Nothing. One does not accept money for life magic." "Can you have it ready for the night of the spring dance?" "I'll come pick it up the night before." "Yes." "All right then, it's settled. I'll see you the night before the spring dance." As Dry Creek turned back to his Jeep, the old shaman mumbled something that he couldn't quite hear. "What did you say, old man?" The shaman hesitated a bit before he spoke again. "I said, remember that Kokopelli is a trickster. Beware." Dry Creek laughed and nodded. He jumped into his Jeep and fishtailed back to the dusty road off the mesa. I wonder what he meant by that. Probably just more superstitious mumbo-jumbo. The shaman's wife stood up as her husband returned to help her prepare their vegetable plot. "You honor one who deserves no honor." "Perhaps. That one knows less than he thinks. He does not know what he asks, and I am going to give it to him. in the spirit of Kokopelli. The day before the spring dance, Dry Creek had driven to the shaman's hut on the mesa and picked up the amulet. He then went home for dinner, but he returned to the flute shop afterwards. The sun had almost set as he sat in his jeep in the parking area. The shaman had told him that the ceremony would be complete at full dark, and after that he would soon expect to see Kokopelli. Dry Creek went into the shop and turned on all the lights, both inside and outside. I might as well see this character. I wonder if I'll recognize the person playing Kokopelli. He knew most of the residents on the reservation, so he thought that he might. He sat down in his office chair and hung the amulet around his neck. It won't be long now. He started to thumb through the library book again, frequently glancing out the window. After about a half hour, he finally heard what he'd been awaiting. Flute music, and it was getting louder. He sprang to his feet and opened the door to the shop. Soon he could make out the flute player, dancing across the parking area under the full moon. The feather headdress that he wore bobbed and waved as Kokopelli approached Dry Creek and the open door. Dry Creek backed into the shop to get a better look at the flute player. I've never seen this guy before. The flute-playing spirit man wore a brightly colored serape that hung down to his knees. The feathers of his headdress were of the same bright colors, and he wore open-toed sandals. He played his flute rapidly, barely stopping for breath. Dry Creek watched him dance around the shop a bit, and then approached him. "So, you've come at last. Give me the flute." The flute player immediately stopped playing, but continued dancing. "Are you sure you want it?" the man whispered. "Yes." Dry Creek snatched the flute from the man. "Now I can do whatever I want to, and no maiden can reject me." "Not exactly. Taking the flute, you have also taken my place. Now you must do what I have done all these years. You will have no rest until someone takes your place." "What are you talking about?" "You are Kokopelli now. You must play and dance at every single village ceremony from now on, without rest, until you can trick someone into taking your place." "What? I can't do that." "You have no choice. You are Kokopelli now. You have taken the sacred flute." "I just want it for tomorrow night. I'll give it back to you after tomorrow night." To Dry Creek's horror, even as he watched, the outline of the man began to blur. "You cannot. It is done. The spirit of Kokopelli is satisfied. At last I can join my ancestors." "No, I just want it tomorrow night. Look, I'll pay you to take it back after that." The man had been smiling, but now he began to laugh softly. He had stopped dancing. "No, I'm serious. How much money do you want?" "Pay? A spirit? Your money means nothing to me." Dry Creek suddenly felt an overwhelming compulsion to dance. "No, I mean it. I'll give all my money to you, or to the tribe, or to my flute makers then. Just take the flute back." The man just laughed softly. He was fading away as Dry Creek stared at him. Dry Creek could see right through him. "Don't go! I mean it! Here, I'll write it out!" Desperately, Dry Creek scrabbled across his desk after a pen. He seized his account book and started scrawling madly on a blank page. "Here, see, I bequeath my company to my flute makers. Equipment, accounts, everything. Now, take back your flute." The serape-clad man was barely visible as Dry Creek looked up and held out the flute. "You are Kokopelli now. You cannot change that. The spirit of Kokopelli is satisfied." "No, wait! Take back your flute, please!" "You are Kokopelli now." The man was gone, and his whispered words faded to nothing. Suddenly, Dry Creek realized that he was wearing the man's serape, feather headdress, and sandals. Desperately, he hurled the flute towards the open window, but it immediately reappeared in his hand. As he began to dance against his will, he felt compelled to play the flute. "No!" he shrieked. Manuel arrived at work on time the next morning. As foreman, he had the key to the building, but he was surprised to find the door standing open. And the lights were still on, both inside and outside. That was strange. He went in and turned off the outside lights. Seeing no one else there, he peeked into his boss's office. Sometimes Dry Creek would leave him written instructions for the day if the boss was going to be gone. He saw the company's account book open with some scrawled, obviously hurried handwriting across one page. He leaned over the desk and picked it up. A thick sheaf of orders for flutes fell out onto the desk. In Dry Creek's handwriting, he read, "I give my company, the building, all equipment, all outstanding orders, and accounts to my employees. Manuel is the new boss." Below that was a signature, Smithson Barrett. I didn't know that Smithson Barrett was his full name. Hey, what's he talking about? Where did he go? Then it hit Manuel. The company is ours? I am the new boss? He reread the writing. In disbelief, he went outside and looked all around the building. No boss. Dry Creek's Jeep was still parked in the usual spot. The hood was cold. It hadn't been moved for hours. He didn't see the boss anywhere. Stunned, he went back inside. He read the writing again. "Hey, Manuel, where's the boss?" He looked up and saw Arminio, Tomas, and Jose walk in. "I don't know. Look at this." He pushed the account book towards them. Slowly, they read what was written there. "He's giving the company to us? And now you're the boss? Does that mean he won't be back? Where did he go?" "I don't know. Maybe he won't be back. But if he doesn't come back, we're working for ourselves now. Things will be different. No pay cut for starters. Look at all these orders. Now Luis will have a job again. Amigos, we have some flutes to make." And that actually happened to a friend of mine who lives right next to a reservation.